The Supreme Court is set to decide whether states can ban transgender athletes from competing on girls' and women's sports teams.
27 states have enacted laws that do so. Today, the court is expected to hear arguments in 2 cases after a pair of transgender athletes claimed they are being discriminated against by the policies in their home states. That includes Idaho, the first state in the nation to enact such a law.
Joining us from Washington this morning is David Cole. He's a Georgetown University law professor and former national legal director of the ACLU. So, Professor, help us understand what the court will be considering in these cases.
Well, it's essentially asking whether it violates equal protection of the Constitution to tell a transgender girl that she cannot engage in athletics in her school unless she denies her gender identity, that she cannot play on the girls' team, she cannot play on the women's team, even if, as was the case with respect to both of the transgender women in these cases, they have no sex-based advantage over the typical girl because they have taken puberty blockers, they have taken hormones that basically put them physically in the same sort of world as the other girls on the team. Idaho and West Virginia say that doesn't matter. You can't participate. The only way you can participate is if you deny who you are, deny your gender. You're going to be the only woman on the men's team.
What I did find interesting, I was researching this, is that this has nothing to do with legal piece of it, but close to 70%, according to the Williams Institute, of people are against, transgender athletes competing in women's sports. I did want to ask you about something that caught my attention. The Trump administration filed what's called a friend of the court brief in support of the defendants here. Can you explain what that is and what kind of impact it could have?
So that's very typical that the United States will file a friend of the court brief, an amicus brief. It's a brief filed by someone who's not a party to the case but has an interest in how the case gets resolved. And they have taken the position that, as they have taken the position, very publicly, that transgender women should never be permitted to play on a women's team, even where it's not competitive, even where they have eliminated any sex-based advantage they might have because they were identified male at birth. The Trump administration, for ideological reasons, wants to preclude transgender women from any participation in sports that does not require them to deny who they are. And that's the question the court will face with whether that's consistent with the Equal Protection Clause. It's obviously consistent with equal protection to have separate girls and boys teams because of the general differences. But in situations where trans girls have eliminated those differences through science and the like, there's no justification to keep them off the team. They're not beating out people in any unfair way. They don't have any advantage. And the only justification for excluding them is anti-trans bias.
So, Professor, you point out that this law, as it exists, raises these constitutional issues, privacy, equal protection, sex discrimination. Up until 2023, the court was declining to review these cases. They were kicking it back down to the lower courts, in essence, almost sending the message that they wanted the lower courts to develop the law around this, and they were unwilling or maybe skittish about setting a national law in place for this issue. Do you think that that's going to change now?
Well, that's definitely going to change. And that's also quite typical that when issues arise in the lower courts, the Supreme Court will not necessarily take the first case that comes up. It will see how the lower courts are doing, and it will engage generally only where there is a disagreement among the lower courts that can only be resolved by the Supreme Court. And that's where we are today. And so today's argument will be the court's effort to resolve this, not just for Idaho, not just for West Virginia, but for the nation and for all transgender women across this country.
Really interesting. Professor David Cole, thank you very much for joining us. We'll be watching that SCOTUS case. Appreciate it.
Thanks.